Everybody uses radio to some extent in their everyday life. Whether it's being used for sports, news, weather, or entertainment, radio is an integral feature of modern times. But there is a vast history behind that piece of equipment. Did you know where the first broadcast station in the world was located?
I don't know, maybe New York?
Well, just off the top of my head, I'd say Dublin, Ireland.
San Francisco?
Milpitas?
Oh, I thought it was Walla Walla, Washington.
Oh, I think it is Southland.
Probably San Francisco.
Although several stations on the East Coast claim to be the first broadcast station, the very first documented broadcast station was right here in San Jose. I'm standing on the corner of 1st and San Fernando Street, where the Garden City Bank of San Jose stood in the early part of this century. From the 5th floor of this building, a man by the name of Charles Herrold began broadcasting in January 1909, almost 2 decades before the first stations were licensed by the Department of Commerce. Next to me is a plaque commemorating this triumph in radio history. Doc Herrold, as he is known, opened up his School of Radio in the beginning of 1909, where he and several other electronics enthusiasts began experimenting with different forms of broadcasting. In 1921, after broadcast licenses were issued, Herrold Station became known as KQW. The station went through a number of owners over the next few years until 1949, when the call letters were changed to KCBS and the location moved to San Francisco. Mike Adams, a professor of radio and television at San Jose State and a member of the Perham Foundation Board of Trustees at Foothill College, has researched these early years of Doc Herrold's broadcasting.
Back in 1909, I doubt if anyone used the word radio, or certainly not the word broadcasting. Back in 1909, it was wireless. It was ship-to-shore transmission for purposes of commercial shipping and commerce. It was done with the dots and dashes of Morse code. At that time, in downtown San Jose, at the corner of 1st and San Fernando, Charles D. Herrold had a school where he would train these new wireless operators. He developed a unique way of modulating the dits and dahs and the buzzes of the spark gap with a telephone microphone, and he broadcast music, he broadcast community news, he even did a few commercials for his wireless school. He was certainly an innovator, and what he did back in 1909 certainly set the stage for what today we call broadcasting. This is one of the devices that Charles Doc Herrold modified for his students to use back in 1909. Typically, a telegraph or a wireless operator would wear a headset like this and would tap out Morse code messages from ship stations to shore stations to regulate the travel of commerce, which was done with ships back then. And Herrold decided that he would modulate the spark or the arc of the transmission with this carbon microphone, which was connected with a large DC voltage hooked up to one side of a transformer, and the other side of the transformer was hooked up to an arc which was immersed in alcohol, and then the entire modulated arc was coupled to the antenna using coils like this. Now, besides speaking into the microphone as a news person or a DJ would do, Herrold's wife, Sybil True, used to get phonograph records from the local record store, and they would advertise. This record store gave them records, and they would play on this old Edison crank-up phonograph. The bell of this was modified to send the music of the record into the microphone here, a rather crude acoustic coupling device. And this was how Herrold students learned about radio. This was way ahead of its time. If you were a shipboard operator back in 1909 and you were used to listening to the dits and dahs of Morse code arc transmission, and all of a sudden you heard music coming through your headphones, I'm sure some of these people probably threw off their headphones and jumped overboard. It would be a bizarre experience because there was nothing like it back then.
KQW, the Charles Herrold exhibit, was just one of the many from the rich history of electronics in the Bay Area, displayed at the now vacant Foothill Electronics Museum. During the summer of 1991, it was all packed into boxes for moving and storage. As the packing began, a video class from San Jose State University documented the museum for the last time.
Erected in 1969 and opened for business in 1973, the Foothill Electronics Museum offers its visitors an opportunity to learn a lot about electronics in a short time. Its many priceless artifacts and documents make up America's electronic heritage. The museum's mini displays feature original equipment, not replicas. Things like the spark gap transmitter, Audion, early tube amplifier, and a UHF transmitter tube are a few of the many pivotal creations that make up the museum's repertoire. The museum gets its artifacts from West Coast's inventors and entrepreneurs. The pride and joy of this museum is an archival library built upon a foundation of books, papers, and journals from Dr. Lee DeForest. His collection of notes is still to this day a major source of data for historians of the electronics industry. The museum is funded almost entirely by the Douglas M. Perham Foundation. The Perham Foundation is a nonprofit organization composed of private citizens dedicated to the preservation of priceless electronic artifacts. The foundation funds the museum through membership donations, sponsored flea markets, videotape sales, and admission fees. With the loss of funds brought about by the passage of Proposition 13 in 1978, the school attempted to close the museum. At that point, the Perham Foundation took over its operation. The museum was under constant pressure to raise more funds, yet under constant threat of eviction. Trying to raise funds for a museum that may not be there tomorrow proved very difficult. In January of 1990, their worst fears proved true. Foothill Board of Trustees elected to evict the museum. The foundation elected to fight back.
We went to court and got an injunction that meant that the museum could be kept open during the period that we were in court. After 18 months of court battle, we came to an agreement that we would take the artifacts and the archives and leave this building to the college district, and we would move the museum to another location, and that is what we're attempting to do now.
Okay. Cy Stein has been involved with the foundation for 28 years.
The court's decision was that the district would pay the Perham Foundation a sum of money, $775,000, and award all the artifacts and archives to the Perham Foundation in trust. So we are the trustees of this collection.
Because of the decision to move the museum by September 15th, it is now looking for a new home. And until that new home can be found, the Electronics Museum can be known as a museum in a box.